All right, everybody. This is Andrea Bergoa. I am the Custom and Labs Marketing Manager for Macmillan Learning. I want to thank you guys for attending. Everybody is currently muted, so if you have questions, there will be instructions in just a minute on how to ask those. We just want to make sure that there's no background noise and we can give a nice clean presentation for you guys today. So welcome to our webinar on lab simulations in the biology and chemistry classroom. Today our presenter is going to be Molly Piles. Molly, if you want to move to the next slide. So Molly is one of our lab solutions specialists. She has a BS in chemistry from Schreiner University and then an MS from Baylor with a focus in novel organic synthesis. She's been with us for 6 years and she's worked on a variety of digital labs initiatives, including our lab simulations, as well as our smart worksheets and our Hayden McNeil online course solution. And she's really passionate about providing instructor solutions and student learning. I'll let her tell you guys a little more about that. She can speak well for herself. But fun facts about Molly, she's also an aviation enthusiast. You can see her there with the plane in the bottom picture. So just a little personal note there about Molly. Molly, if you want to go to the next slide. Just real quickly, using GoToWebinar, you can see here this top arrow that points to the right helps you minimize your little pop-out window. You can pop this out into a separate window on the right. And if you see that little like window looking thing under the microphone, that's your toggle to full screen or to window mode. And Molly, just next one we'll show you real quick. If you ever lose the webinar, if you look down in your tray at the bottom, that little flower is going to be your GoToWebinar button, and that should pull the webinar back up if you ever lose us. So Molly, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I good?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, perfect. So we're very excited to show off our Hayden McNeil lab simulations. We're very excited about them because of several reasons. The first is that they're interactive. It does simulate the total lab experience, including putting on personal protective equipment, has both a sink and a waste container, just like students would have in a real lab. It's flexible. You're able to edit the background and the procedures as well as the assessments so that it matches your learning objectives in particular. It's accessible, so students using just keyboard strokes are able to navigate through the activity and interact with the entire activity itself. And I'm excited to show that today. And the last thing is that it is able to be used for many different scenarios, including both pre-lab and in-lab situations. So as a pre-lab, it could help prepare your students before they come to lab, or it could completely replace your lab experience if that needs to go online entirely. So we're going to actually kind of dive into them pretty quickly here. So this is kind of just a screenshot of what these look like. And I have gone ahead and loaded that here. So these courses are built in a way that the students have access to the background and procedure information first. They also have information for the short answer and multiple choice questions right below. Now these can be used together. You can use both of them. You could choose one of them. You could choose to put them into one assignment. You can also add to them. So if there are other questions that you wanted to add to these, you're more than welcome to as well. So I've gone ahead and opened up the apparent molecular weight of air. And you can see the background information. This is something that is editable. So if there's something that you particularly like to teach about, if there's a particular gas that you usually cover in lecture and want to be sure to cover in lab as well, you can always include that information. The next page goes to the procedure. So these procedures do follow along with what they do in the lab itself. Students have a few different options for how they can use this procedure. So these icons will launch the actual interactive in a new window. So as we talk to students, we found that students have different methods of learning. So some students preferred to be able to tab back and forth. Others preferred to actually be able to do a split screen and actually be able to have both of them open at the same time. So different options there. Other students also liked to be able to print their procedures off and then use them. So they are able to print the entire book or just the chapter with the procedure in it. For this one, I'm actually just going to leave the simulation as a full screen so that we can see it at full. So the first step is actually to put on my personal protective equipment. So I'll be able to add my goggles, my lab coat, and my gloves. And they can click anywhere in that box, so it's not just in a single spot. Once they've done that once, they're able to enter the lab. You can always skip this animation if that's something that a student wants to save a little bit of time. They don't have to watch that simulation. It's also available to skip for accessibility reasons. But it does walk the student straight into lab and give them a nice clean lab bench. You can see the waste container at the bottom and the sink on the right. And students are then able to interact with anything on the shelves. So over to the right, they actually have arrows to be able to skim through other things on the shelf. You can see there's quite a bit of different glassware. So what we've done is given students the ability to choose different things based off of the lab procedure itself, to really be able to explore, to not feel locked into, I only have this amount of time to finish lab. It does give them a little bit more exploration time. What we found is that this can be a little bit more impactful to students that feel pressure in the lab to get something done, and instead they do have the ability to not be afraid to learn. They can click through, they can try things out, they could do a procedure incorrectly, see what happens, and that way, if they are then coming to a physical lab experience, they are a little bit more prepared and ready to kind of go into that feeling, more prepared to do the actual lab. So what I've first done is actually given myself a little water bath, and I'm going to also bring myself down an Erlenmeyer flask and not put it in the waste container. Set it on my bench. So I can set this wherever I would like to on the bench, and then I can add things to it. One of the things that we've really thought about here with glassware is that different glassware should be a little bit different for what students know about it. If you hover over it, it doesn't really do anything. If you click on it, it's going to tell you what it is, but you're actually able to double click on it and give it some different options. So because this is an Erlenmeyer flask, you could choose to close it with a cork, and we can also choose to rename it. So I'm just going to call it a flask just so we can rename it. And now you can see when I click on it, I see flask. This is something that as you go through labs, a lot of times you will have them label things, 1 through 6 on test tubes, or they should know which graduated cylinder has the acid in it versus which one has the base in it. This is kind of how we've put this together for students to be able to label things, since we obviously don't want them using a permanent marker on their computer screen. This does give them the option to label things as they need to. Similarly with a beaker, beakers don't have a lid, so there's nothing to close, but you can still label the container. And then the other one to kind of show off is the graduated cylinder. And this one, when you double click it, not only can you label it, but you can also see the meniscus. So this actually allows students to read the volume that is in the container. So if I go ahead and add some water to it, I'm going to give it, say, 24 milliliters. And you can see it will actually fill that container with 24 milliliters. And then if we double click on it, you can see the meniscus lines up just around 24, but not exactly, so that students can actually simulate a real experience of being in lab and knowing that just because you added 24 milliliters doesn't mean you got exactly 24 milliliters. So you could actually read that and say maybe that's 23.8 or 23.9. So we definitely have kind of thought a lot about that student experience and what students should be able to do with that. Now this lab in particular is for gases. So I'm going to go ahead and add my pressure gauge, and I'm going to give myself a thermometer. Now once I add those, I can move that around. So if I wanted to put that back on the bench top, I can do that. You can put it just about anywhere you would like to, except for the waste container. The waste container is going to say there's nothing to pour here, you can't do anything. So you say cancel, it's going to go right back to your bench top. Had there been anything in the container, it would let you say how much do you want to dump out, if you want to set all of it out or not. In this case, I'm going to choose to add some propane though to my flask, and I'm going to choose to add 1.2 atmospheres. So you can see my pressure gauge has changed to 1.2. And the last thing I'm going to add is a gas syringe. So I want to be able to see exactly how much is in there. So I can actually click on it and see, okay, the current volume is 62.8. And I'm going to go ahead and add it to my water bath and start to heat it up. I'm actually going to heat it a little bit faster. But just like in a normal lab, as you heat gas, it's going to expand. And so you'll actually have that syringe expanding. And if it does get too hot, it will actually let the plunger fly out, just like in a real lab. So this is where we've then considered what happens, right? Given it more of a real lab experience where the plunger then pops out. And this is where you can then choose to reset your plunger. And I'm going to move it out so it doesn't pop out again. So there's no gas left, so it won't. So that's, we've definitely experienced and encouraged students to be able to mess up, to be able to do something wrong, to make a mistake, and then to be able to start over. So if I've done something totally wrong, I just want to completely clear my bench, I can always choose to reset the lab. In addition, I can always put things back on the shelf. So if I want to get rid of my thermometer, I can drop the thermometer back on the shelf, the pressure gauge back on the shelf. The rest of these things should get washed. So for the flask, I can put it into the sink once I dispose of the waste. I'm going to get rid of all of my water. Okay. So I did want to also show a biology while we're here. So this one in particular is on carbohydrates, sugars, starches, and the Benedict's test. So we've given them several different indicators in this lab, but they do have quite a few things to choose from. So in this case, I'm also going to put on all of my PPE, but I'm going to skip the animation. And in this one in particular, I'm going to also show when you do go partial screen, it does collapse everything. So this is something that we've done for accessibility reasons. So if you have a smaller screen, or say students don't have a full-sized laptop, if they've got something like a Chromebook or something like that, the screen is automatically smaller, and we want to be able to give them the same or similar experience to a student who does have a large screen. So this is where students can actually click each thing and actually see what's on the shelf, so they can choose from what's on the shelf. Additionally, we've collapsed the waste area and the sink area so that when students do drag and drop things, they're able to see those down there. Now quickly, just to show kind of keyboard navigation, I'm just using my tab button right now to kind of go through and see what everything is. If I use the space bar, that is my clicking. So you can see, I've got my mouse elsewhere, but I can use my space bar and click through things. If I want to pick something up, well, I guess let me grab a test tube first, and I can use the space bar to pick it up, and then I can choose where I want to drop it. So this gives me the bench top, it gives me the waste container and the sink to put it away. So I'd like to put that right there on the bench top. And then I'm going to go through, I would actually like some glucose, and I'm going to tab through, and I want to say I want to add it to my test tube, space bar, and I'm going to go ahead and add 6 milliliters. So just like a student with a mouse, you can also go through and click through with just the keyboard navigation. These also allow for things like tablets to be able to interact with all of the equipment and materials and containers that we've given them. So I'm going to go ahead and again add my constant temperature water bath. I'm going to give myself a couple more test tubes, and I'm going to add glucose to all of those. Give myself 6 milliliters in each of those. And now I'm going to go find my indicator. So I'm looking for my Benedict solution. There it is. And this one I'm going to add 4 milliliters of it to each of these. You know what, I'm going to give myself some burette solution as well. So you can see that these do have different colors based off of the different indicators. Students can always drag them up against the white if they need to see them more clearly. See, this one's a little more green than it is blue. And then from there, we can put it into our water bath, and we can drag that around. So we can move our water bath once it has things in it. And then I also want to see a thermometer. So as I heat this one, we should see some different color changes happening. And what we've done with the color changes is make them very, very vivid, so that students with any kind of visual impairment, excuse me, are still able to see those changes happen. And you can also see that, like, we've thought about the water bath, you know, as it gets hotter, it should do different things. So you can see as this gets warmer, it does change colors, and those are very bright, vivid colors. Should go to red here shortly. So we have simulated lab in a very interesting way, giving students lots of different compounds, lots of different materials. That way, you know, when they do get to lab, they know which kinds of things that they are looking for in particular. You know, they do have a little bit more freedom. The other thing that's nice about that is that if you chose, instead of using glucose, you want them all to use maltose. You could alter the procedure from semester to semester so that instead of glucose, they're using maltose. You could have them use several. You could have them, you know, do kind of, you know, a pretty nice little customized lab pretty easily because you have access to all of those materials. So in order to put everything away, you can click and drag, empty the waste, and then be able to put the test tube in the sink to get washed and put my instrument away. Going back to the course itself, just to kind of quickly show some of that. It does handle sections very well, so you can have as many sections as you need to in a single course. You're able to manage those sections of students very easily. You're also able to give students different quizzes or different quiz due dates and times based off of what section they're in. So if you do have a section starting on Monday and a section starting on Tuesday and a section on Wednesday, each of them can have their own due dates for these quizzes. So you can have them, submit these either before lab, after lab, whatever you would like to set it to is possible. So each of these come along with pre-built both multiple choice and short answer type questions. So this one in particular is the short answer for the chemistry gas lab that we looked at first. So as they're going through the experiment, they can record the data that they've gathered, and they'll submit that for grading. Each of these also comes along with a rubric for you as the instructor. So as you're grading these assignments in short answer, they actually have a rubric for here is what the correct answer should be, so that if you don't want to go through the entire simulation, you're not required to. It gives you the answers anticipated from the student. So you can actually kind of see, here's what we expected the student to get, and here's what they actually got. The multiple choice questions are all automatically graded. So as an instructor, you do not need to grade those yourself. Those will just be graded for you. So students can click through, answer questions, and go to the next question. And there are different settings for this. You can have students know if they got it right or wrong when they go to the next question, or like this one, navigate through the entire quiz before being told what their grade is. So there's lots of options. These are all pre-built for you, but you can always edit these quizzes. So if there are questions that you really like or don't like, you can choose which ones you are using, as well as create your own questions if you wanted to add any in. Yeah, so those are kind of the basic outline of the course, how the ebook works, where the simulations are linked to, and then as well what those simulations look like to a student. And at this point, I would like to go ahead and open it up to questions. Go ahead and present back to here. A couple other features. We talked a little about the course and section management. It does have a very powerful gradebook. So these gradebooks will gather all of the grades inputted for each student. And we do have an integration available to your learning management system. So you are able to push back that course total from our online course to your LMS like Blackboard or Canvas. And then there's always the option to customize these. So if there are other digital lab assets that you're interested in, we are able to host those in our online course as well. And then I just have a list of the currently available simulations, and I will start to kind of flip back and forth between the chemistry and the biology lists during Q&A.
Thanks, Molly. I appreciate that. So now is Q&A time. So if anybody has any questions, there is a little question box in your little pop-out window. Just go ahead and click on the little caret there, pull it down and ask your question. We do have a question. Let's see. Is there a mouse click log, Molly?
Not currently. This is something that we have thought about. It's not currently available.
Okay. Yeah. So we know that is a feature that is currently in our simulations product that is being retired. And we do understand that knowing that your students have done the lab is important and gone through. But not right now. But the assessments are a great way to find out whether your students have done the work and gone through the simulation. Molly, we had a great conversation earlier today, and I was just hoping you could share with us. You were speaking with an instructor yesterday, and they were talking about removing fear of the lab. Do you want to just share that feedback really quickly?
Yeah, so one of the reasons this instructor is very passionate about using simulations is that he felt like his students felt a lot of pressure when they came to the lab, that they felt like they had to get it done. So they had X amount of time, they had to come to lab. As they worked through the experiment, they would make mistakes, but they just kind of kept going with those mistakes because they didn't feel like they had time to start over. They didn't feel like they had time, to acknowledge those mistakes that were made and figure out either why they happened or, how to prevent them. And so part of his using simulations as pre-lab material for his students was so that as his students come to lab, they no longer have that fear because they've already worked out those fears during that simulation. And they were like afraid to actually learn when they came to lab without the simulations. So he felt like they were so impactful, no longer felt like they were pressured to just get it done, get their grade, get their results, and move on. So he felt like it actually helped reinforce with them not only that like you're here to learn, you're here to make mistakes. Here's this software where you can make those mistakes before you come to lab. And that they were just very practical for then bringing those students into lab, them feeling more comfortable, them feeling like, oh, now I don't need to be worried about making those mistakes because I already made them earlier. I know what things to do, what things not to do. Just really kind of freed them up to not feel so much pressure to do well in lab because they already knew what they were up to before they walked in the door. And that's something that we hear a lot from instructors is wanting to have students prepared before they come to labs. So they don't walk in and not know what their glassware looks like, not know what chemicals they should be looking for. It really kind of helps free them up to think through the theory of what they were doing with their hands rather than just, here's the procedure, I need to read this and I need to do exactly what it tells me to do. Because they've now gotten to experience it, they've gotten to try it, they've gotten to do, the wrong things and get to play with it first before coming into a lab and having to kind of put all of those things to work. It was really exciting.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the questions we have is using your own labs and questions. So you can definitely edit the procedures to match your current labs. And of course, you can customize all of the assessments as well. So we have a question bank that you can choose from, and you can also create your own questions with a lot of different question types, not only short answer and multiple choice, but multiple select and numeric, things like that.
Yeah, the only customizable, I'll kind of chime in a little bit, is what's on the shelf inside the lab. But if all of the chemicals are on the shelf in the lab, I encourage you to try them all out, kind of run your experiment as you're writing it, just to make sure it does what you want it to do. But then being able to kind of write a procedure to go along with some different chemicals that are currently in that lab itself is definitely possible.
Yes. And I do want to add, there's a question about plans for additional labs. So this is the list of things that are currently available, but we are working on more. But this is going to be what's available for spring 20. But we will be working on more for fall, and there will be more updates to come on what's going to be available. Let's see. All right, we have another question here. Oh yeah, so very similar, since we don't have mouse click, is it possible to edit the lab procedure to the point where I could change the amount of chemical used? Absolutely, yes. I need to make sure they're not doing the experiment and getting data from the internet. Yeah, we totally understand that concern. I think that was a major concern with our previous product. So it's absolutely editable. There should not be a lot of data floating around the internet. Molly has some experience with that, I think. Yeah.
The other nice thing is, I showed how the meniscus isn't always exactly the volume that they added. So that will also help a little bit if they're giving, kind of the same answer over and over again. You can kind of put up a little bit of a flag and say, actually, you should be able to read that a little bit differently. So we've kind of thought through a little bit of that, academic honesty piece of it, and really wanting students to actually interact with the interactive, and really give those answers that they're seeing, not just give the same answers to every student.
Andrea, there was
and that was the great thing about having.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There was an attendee with his hand raised for a while. I'm going to unmute him in case that it might have been an accident, it might not have, but I'm going to unmute him in case he wants to verbally ask a question.
Okay.
Nope. Looks like it might have just been an accident, but it also looks like we have another question, by the way.
Yeah, so will students be able to see grading comments after the due date has passed?
Yes, absolutely. So as an instructor, when you're grading short answer questions, you are able to enter two different pieces of information. First is how many points did they earn out of however many points it was worth. And the second piece of information is commentary. So if for the short answer questions, maybe they got close but not quite, each question was worth 1 point. So maybe you gave them 0.9 of that 1 point. And then you could give them a comment and you could write, you were so close, the actual answer is X. It's possible that you did Y when you should have done Z, or something to that effect. So you are able to kind of give both a quantitative and a qualitative review of their work. You're not required to do both, but they're both available to you. Once you submit those, the student is able to review that. So when they come to, say, midterms or finals, they can go back and review anything that has been done prior. The simulations themselves also don't disappear from them unless you hide them from them. So students could go back and redo some simulations again if they wanted to review a specific concept, or, oh, I can't remember what happened when I added the sodium hydroxide in that step. What was the point of that? They can go back and review those simulations as well as any commentary in the assessments.
And part of the great thing about them always being able to go back to those simulations is sometimes you just have a student who just loves to see what happens when they do things. And that is all. Molly, were you one of those students? I feel like you might have been.
I might have been that one that wanted to see the color changes again and again. Yeah. You know.
So it gives a lot of options.
Yes, it does.
All right, I'm gonna give a 60-second warning for questions. So if we don't get any more questions in the next 60 seconds, I'll go ahead and this seems that this program is very complex since the instructor needs to learn how to use it. How concerned? Oh, learn how to use it on their own. All of my students are online and never even met them in person or attend my online tutoring hours. Anthony, that's a great question. So there is an introduction to lab simulations module in here. So it's not currently ready in HTML5, but it will be for spring. And it teaches them how to use the lab simulation. So you won't have to worry about training your students. And then as far as instructor training goes, we will give you all the support that you need to help get you up and running. If anyone has any additional questions, there will be a recording of this webinar that's sent to you, and we'll make sure that my email is in there. If you have any questions, you can let me know, and I can, of course, connect you with your representative. We have another question. What is the cost? Can you select only a few simulations? It's a great question. Yes, so we have different tiers available for this. So if you just want to do a couple lab replacements a year. You can do 1 to 2 simulations. Now just keep in mind 1 to 2 simulations is only available if you have more than 100 students per year. But you can do 1 to 2 simulations for $9.95 net. We can do 3 to 5 simulations for $24.95 net, and you can get access to 6 or more unlimited simulations for $59.95. So that would be pretty much a total lab replacement if all of you're teaching an online only class, and you would have access to everything. And as I mentioned, my email address will be in the email with the recording. So feel free to reach out with any questions. If they're technical, I'll probably send them to Molly.
But you'll get an answer.
You'll get an answer. Yeah, we'll absolutely get back to you with an answer. And we're so happy that you've all attended. Thank you so much for the great questions. We really appreciate it. We're really excited about our new Hayden McNeil Lab simulations and all of the flexibility and accessibility that comes with them.
And I may add, and you may have already said it, so actually we have one more question, by the way, Andrea. But while you're reading that, the way to get access, the way to pursue this further will be included when we follow up with the recording of this. We will send everyone the recording that's sort of annotated with a TOC. So if you wanted to go back and review something, you'll know the sort of the general timestamp. But yes, there is one more question, at least, Andrea, just popped up.
Yeah, I see that. So Molly, must every lab have a simulation, or is there a lab scenario explaining what happens in the lab, then questions for them to answer?
Can you read that one more time?
Yes, I can. It's kind of a complicated question. Does every lab have to have a simulation, or is there a scenario explaining what happens in the lab? So I guess just text explaining what happens, and then questions for them to answer.
I don't see why that wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm kind of thinking through. So if you just had kind of the ebook situation where it kind of explains a lab, doesn't actually have a link out to a simulation, but you could still have then questions that follow that ebook. That's absolutely possible to be done. It wouldn't be necessarily like a provided piece of this product, but it would be something that would be easy for an instructor to be able to, you know, say copy a book so that it all has the same formatting and just change all of the words. It's possible. I don't see why not.
Yeah, and I imagine with the editable background and procedure, you could do that. And if it was a case of you just wanted them to understand the procedure, I guess you could embed screenshots, right, Molly?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, the ebook will support having images embedded inside of it. Yeah, pretty much, yeah, do a lot with it.
Yeah, one more question, how do you get access to the course? So, like I said, reach out to me. My email address is andrea.bergoa@macmillan.com, but it will come in the follow-up email. I can absolutely connect you to your rep to get you an in-depth demo and get courses created. We do have a course sign-up form that you fill out that tells us which labs you're using so we can build your course. If you're using the unlimited lab option, you get all of the labs in your course. You don't have to choose. But for the 1 to 2 and the 3 to 5, you do have to choose the labs that you want loaded into your course. All right. Thank you so much for all of your participation. We really appreciate it. Like I said, we're really excited about our new lab simulations product. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, folks. I'm going to end things now. Thank you for everyone. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Andrea. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
That was